We have a full agenda. Nice to see the crowd today. Please silence your cell phones. To begin our meeting, I'll ask Representative Keel to offer our prayer.
Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity that we have today to work together, to be together, to work for what is best for the children in our state. Lord, thank you for this opportunity you've given us to appropriate the money that has come in, that you've blessed us with. Lord, I pray that it would be used by our educators to help our children, and Lord, make us all more successful. Lord, thank you for this group that works together so well. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Clerk will call the roll. Here.
Here.
Representative Drummond, Representative Almond, Representative Baker. Here. Representative Chestnut, Representative Collins. Here. Representative Calder. Representative Daniels.
Here.
Representative Ellis. Here. Representative Faulkner. Here. Representative Lawrence. Here. Representative Lovern. Here. Representative Stubbs. Here. Representative Wood.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of guests today. A special guest, William Brother Poole. Where are you? Brother, come on. One of our pages. He's a veteran page. You may know him. Welcome, brother. Do we have other pages that someone can introduce? Are you a guest today? Do you want to tell us who you are? Welcome. Say again.
My name is Deacon Will, and I'm here for paging.
Great. Thank you, Deacon. Welcome. Any other guests? All right, we have a full agenda today and a couple of public hearings. We're going to try to move expeditiously. We do have a couple of bills that are non-budget related, and I have a couple of committee members that are presenting in the Senate committee today. So we're going to give them a little bit of time to get here before we move to the meat of the agenda. So I would ask that Representative Collins, HB 475.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your permission, I'll just stay here. House Bill 475 is a rural hospital investment program. It's something I think could make a very big difference for our rural hospitals that we know are struggling. I'm in a city hospital and they're struggling, so I can imagine how rural are. This program's been very, very successful in Georgia. It sets up a board with 7 members that will be under the Department of Revenue. It would require each of the rural hospitals to have a 5-year plan in order to receive the funds, and they would be capped at $2 million. This is for capital and operational expenses. It's phased in over 3 years. It starts with, in 24, $38 million, and in 25, $60 million, and in 26, $80 million. There are limits to what individuals or married filing jointly or corporations can give, and any unused credit could be rolled over for 3 years. This tax incentive is something that local communities could use to support their local hospitals, which is a investment in their community, and a lot of times these local hospitals could even be their largest employers, and so it lets them use their local tax dollars for their hospitals. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'd ask for a favorable report.
So Representative Collins brought this bill up. I guess it just was introduced last week, I guess. And so I think the point is this is a discussion that we need to have in the budget. We do have some things that are targeting these healthcare needs in the rural areas. Obviously, these credit amounts are huge. I think this bill needs to be vetted tremendously. The point today is to get the bill just really teed up for future discussion. So I'll entertain a motion. Representative Faulkner makes a motion, move. Second, Representative Daniels. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Bill's given a favor
Thank you,
report.
Mr. Chairman.
Is Representative Oliver here? Okay, we'll move that. Senator Wagner, I see that you're here. I think we'll move out of order and let Senator Wagner speak. As a rules chair, you have the authority to make the rules as you go, right? So we'll just move to you. But he's here to talk about one of the bills that's in our budget package, and it's the bill. It's SB 260, SB 278, which has to the loan to distressed colleges and universities. This will be something we'll consider. So, Senator Wagner, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would have been glad to wait my turn, but thank you. This probably was caused by Birmingham Southern's financial issues, but it would apply to any college and four-year institution that came on what I would call hard times financial issues. It will be administered by the state treasurer to provide loans to eligible higher education institutions, which is Section 2 of the bill, sets out eligibility requirements. The state treasurer is charged with setting the terms and administration of any loans, and the treasurer shall report annually to the executive and legislative branches on all loans and their status. Since this is a revolving loan program, proceeds from loan repayments will be deposited back into the fund and may be used in the same manner as any other funds appropriated for this program. Let me make some personal comments about Birmingham Southern. I attended Birmingham Southern my last 2 years of college, went to Auburn my first two, and got a basketball scholarship to Birmingham Southern, so that caused me to transfer. I feel like I got a good education. Several years after I graduated, there was a person that came in as president, and I think he made some poor financial decisions, and Birmingham Southern fell on some hard times financially. Dr. Duravi, who most of you probably know or know of, he did a financial impact study on Birmingham Southern College, and it came out that they have a financial impact of over $97 million a year, which is substantial for a small institution like Birmingham Southern. But it's an institution that we do not need to lose in Birmingham, Jefferson County, and the state of Alabama. A lot of very successful people in Birmingham, surrounding territories, and Alabama have received their degree from Birmingham Southern College. But Senator Smithman and I agreed to sponsor this, and I think this would save Birmingham Southern College. I think Representative Garrett had a lot to do with creating this idea of a distressed institution for higher education, and I want to thank Representative Garrett for the idea, and I think it will work, and it will probably save Birmingham Southern College, which we need to save in our community and the state of Alabama. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to answer any question, or I'm ready for a decision, okay?
Thank you, Senator Wagner. What I want to say was in the bill, just a couple of key things that's important. I think, one, the criteria for this fund source would be the institution has been operating for more than 50 years in Alabama, has a significant impact on the community in which it's located, is experiencing financial hardship, which could lead to closure of the institution, whose governing body has adopted a resolution authorizing them to do this. And this is key, has sufficient assets to pledge as collateral for the loan. So those are some key elements of this. Obviously, this will be administered by the treasurer. If the legislature moves forward with this, then the treasurer would be charged with negotiating the terms and conditions and repayments and things like that. We do expect, I think, some more information. Some members have asked more information, specifics, and we do expect to provide that before this goes to the floor to the vote should it pass out of committee. But I'll entertain questions or a motion at this point. Representative Daniels.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Senator Wagner, for this. I do think that I know that we have a very competent treasurer at this particular point, but I think when we're thinking about the long term and dealing with this long term, we have to, as a legislature, have to figure out, make certain that we're putting some protections in place to be very risk adverse and making certain that I see here where we will be the first place on the mortgage and really controlling the assets if individuals are receiving funds from this if this legislation passes. And so that's certainly good. I also see where public and private institutions would qualify for this, not just limited to Birmingham Southern. And so there are a lot of public institutions that find themselves and private institutions that find themselves in some distress. But I also hope that when we look at this, we're looking at the value that those institutions bring. And hopefully there's some consideration to that as well. I know that in the past there have been conversations about other institutions that have approached the legislature about some similar ask, may not be at this level, but I do believe, I know have a lot of friends that have kids that attend Birmingham Southern or have graduated from Birmingham Southern. A lot of our really well-to-do folks within the state of Alabama are graduates of this fine institution as well, and so I certainly understand that from a parent standpoint, and I put myself in the shoe of a parent that have a child at an institution like this, where they don't, they're sending their kid to an institution to get a quality education, and this institution has had some hard times, and so I certainly agree with that, and so I typically am very risk adverse, but looking at this and looking at the assets and looking at the full picture, I hope that we don't make this sort of a precedence doing this trying to save everyone. But this institution certainly is worthy of being saved. But other institutions that should be considered in our public and private institutions that have things that are in distress as well. And so I typically wouldn't support something like this, but I do support this and look forward to figuring out ways to be helpful, but also making certain that at the end of the day, we're protecting the state and our interests, and that's number one.
Thank you, Daniels. Other questions or comments? Representative Faulkner?
Yeah, Senator Wagner and Chairman Garrett, I want to thank y'all for the way this has been structured and the way you've done this loan type program. My grandmother went to Birmingham Southern and we have scholarship out there in her name, and loved the institution. But that's not why I would vote for this bill. It meant a lot to her and our family, but I have had more. I would say maybe the most I've had since I've been in the legislature of people reaching out to me about the school and the institution. And it was really important to me to see the support and that the school had from its alumni, from students there. I can't tell you the amount of correspondence and communication I received, which showed me that there was a real future for Birmingham Southern. I certainly hope that it'll continue and that it'll get back on its feet with this help under a loan program. And so I do thank you, Senator, and Chairman Garrett, since the senator said a lot of your idea here of the way that you have done this and structured it to make this a loan program. But I plan to support it as well.
Leader Daniel.
At the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the bill of favor report.
Favor report by Leader Daniel. Any other second? Second, Representative Faulkner. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? And again, we will be providing more information to our members, both caucuses later. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, members.
Let's next move through our agenda. We'll go to HB 175. Excuse me. Yeah, HB 175. Okay, this is the rebate The HB 175 is, there's a substitute, and then SB 86 is a Senate companion. These bills are identical. So what the Senate did, as you know, was to reduce the rebate to $275 million, which was $105 per individual and $210 per couple. What the House sub will do will be to double those amounts. So individuals would receive $210, couples $420. So the rebate would be not $275 million, but $550 million. So I guess we need to, number one, to adopt the sub of a motion. Motion by Representative Lovern, second by Representative Ellis. Sub has been adopted. Any questions on the sub? I entertain a motion. Favor report moved by Representative Keel. Second, Representative Lovern. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Bill, that was a nay. Okay. That was aye. Okay.
Nay.
A nay. Okay. So we have Bill's given a favorable report. So that's HB 175. And by the way, SB 86, we're going to go ahead and maybe basically entertain a motion to adopt that sub as well, HB 86, which is identical to HB 75. Moved by Representative Ellis, second Representative Lovern. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Now I'll entertain a motion on the favor report. Representative Lovern, second Representative Keel. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Bill's given a favor report. Now, on the House floor, we need to move HB 175, which is the House bill. All right. Next is SB 85, which is the pay raise. This would provide an increase to salaries of public education employees. It would be a 2% pay raise. It would be applicable to K-12, two-year systems, support personnel, certificated personnel. Fiscal note is $98.5 million. Any questions or comments? Motion for favor report, Representative Keel. Second by Representative Daniels. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Bill's given favor report. Thank you. Next, we'll take SB 267, which is, tell you what, yeah, SB 267. This is a bill that's in the, this is by Senator Chasteen. He's not here, is he? So in the budget, there's a new line item for athletic trainers. This is a program that would basically, we're all aware of a tragic incident or near tragic incident that happened on a football field, and whenever I was watching back during football season in the pros, and how the trainers actually saved this person's life, was responsible for that person being able to recover because of their attention, that they were paid very, very quickly. What's come to light is that a lot of our school systems don't have trainers. There's just a shortage around. Some systems have 7 or 8 trainers, some systems have none. So this bill would basically set up a program to allow for athletic trainers. There's $300,000 budgeted as a line item in the proposed budget. Ultimately, this could grow to $2 million, but it would provide an award of $7,500 per school for trainers. And this is something that became part of the Senate budget package, Representative Chasteen's bill. So, Representative Faulkner.
Yeah, Chairman, maybe you'll answer in Senator Chasteen's absence. I notice it's limited to 1A, 2A, 3A, Title I or rural, defined as not located in an urbanized area of 50,000 or more. Can you shed some light on why we limit it just to those? I mean, I understand the needs there, but I could see a need for this in other classifications of school and certain and even, urban areas.
I'll speak to that. I think Representative Baker might can.
Well, either way, Mr. Chairman, you can take the lead, or I can.
You wait, Representative Baker.
Okay. Representative Faulkner, and by the way, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I was ready to fill in if needed then on this bill, but thank you for taking the lead on the bill. Representative Faulkner, Senator Chasteen had mentioned as to why this was limited just to the 1A through the 3A. And He stated that generally most of these upper level classifications, 4A, 5A, 6A, and even 7A, most of these already have trainers, athletic trainers in their school systems. Now, not all, but some. So this might be something that I think would be ripe to be expanded as needed in time. But the upper level classification, this time, many or most already have athletic trainers in place, whereas a lot of these other smaller schools do not have those in place this time. So I think the intent is to get the program growing or incentivize for the recruitment and retention of these athletic trainers, and that as the need arises or comes to our attention, then we can expand this program as needed.
Representative Baker, if you have any other comments that you'd like to make about the just bill in general?
No, I think you covered it already quite well.
Representative Faulkner.
Yeah, I just was going to follow. Yeah, and I certainly understand that, Representative Baker. I just think they're using whatever, I guess, local funds in an effort to do that. And I wonder about some, particularly schools in my area, up in my area in downtown Birmingham, like Carver or other schools I know where we have, I've been part of groups that have assisted with athletic equipment and things of that. I wonder if the need is also not great in other classifications, I guess, and maybe even more so in some instances because they do have bigger schools and they have maybe a greater need for trainers. That would be my only thought, Mr. Chairman. I'm not opposed to the bill, certainly. I do think that limiting it to those, I would like to see it expanded.
Representative Baker.
And I very much respect everything that you've shared, Representative Faulkner, on that. I would say that this is not intended with the amount in it, so it can be up to $7,500. So this is meant to help incentivize schools then to put money with this and such. So this is meant to cover the $7,500. Obviously doesn't cover the athletic trainer, then stipend or expense on this, but is intended maybe to help incentivize these smaller classification schools to couple their money with this money. Thank you.
I've not researched this in great detail, but I think the cursory research indicates that most of the area in the urban areas, there's more access, there's more people willing to, they're easy to accommodate those needs. I think in some of these areas they just don't have it. There's just a lack, and it's very scary to think that we would have people playing those contact sports and not have a trainer on site. So I think it's a good first step. Yes, sir. Representative Coleman.
For the rural secondary schools, it says, urbanized areas of 50,000 or more. What is an urbanized area? Is that a city? Is that a county? Define area.
Representative Baker.
Best I can tell you on this would be the population figure of 50,000 then was placed. With that, I guess there needed to be some threshold that's somewhat identified as that's one of the things that we've struggled with here in the past. That is sometimes trying to identify rural, and it varies sometimes from one piece of legislation to another. But that was, I really can't, other than just stating that was the landing spot, was at 50,000 on that.
Well, I'm not arguing the number. I've never heard the term urbanized area. Is that a city, a county? What's that circle around?
City, yeah. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Entertain a motion. Moved by Representative Daniels. Second, Representative Colvin. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Bill's given a favorable report. Thank you. By the way, the budget is now up on the web, is accessible on the website. Next, let's look at tab 6, SB 111, Senator Bell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is an appropriation of $1,069,234 to Talladega College. It's the same amount that was in last year's previous budget also.
So Talladega College is a budget line item along with, at the end of our budget, these are private schools that have a history with the state, Southern Preparatory Academy and Talladega College. They both receive appropriations every year. This is level funding from last year. Any questions for the Senator? Entertain a motion? Oh, but Representative Ellis makes a motion. Second, Representative Lovern. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Bill is given a favor report. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next would be SB 262. By the way, that Talladega bill on the floor will be carried by Representative Boyd. SB 262, tab 7, is the same appropriation type item for Tuskegee. And this would be sponsored by Senator Beasley. He's not here, so I will just make mention this would appropriate $13,651,435 in the budget, and I believe that's $500,000 increase from last year for Tuskegee. I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Representative Daniels. Second by Representative Keel. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Bill's given favor report. Thank you. SB 93, Senator Hovey, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're a little bit removed from the introductions, but I appreciate you not introducing me as a page. But I am here today to present a fairly standard appropriation for Southern Preparatory Academy in Camp Hill, formerly Lyman Ward, but to the tune of a little over $389,000 as a line item in our budget.
Any questions for Senator Hovey? Motion by Representative Collins, second by Representative Lovern. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Bill's given favor report. Thank you.
Thank you.
And on the floor, the Tuskegee bill will be carried by Representative Warren, and on the floor in the House, Representative Oliver will carry this bill. Thank you, Senators. So now we're moving into some of the other bills related to the budget, and next is in tab 9, SB 269. There are two amendments to this bill. This is the bill that would establish a K through 12 capital grant program within the Office of Lieutenant Governor. Creates the K through 12 capital grant program funded in the state treasury, provides for the office to award grants of up to $5 million each to local school systems to assist with capital projects, deferred maintenance, or technology needs of a school system, provides for the office to utilize an amount not to exceed 0.25% for funds to administer the program, provides criteria for the office to evaluate grant proposals, requires the office to establish a process to receive grant applications and make approvals, including utilization of a sliding scale of matching requirements, provides for reporting requirements by the grant recipient, requires examination by the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts, and it's effective immediately. So basically, in the budget that came over from the governor, some of the money was reallocated to this fund, and the idea would be that this would be a fund that would be under the administered by the Lieutenant Governor's office. The amendments that you're going to see will provide that the School of Fine Arts, the Cyber School, and the Alabama Institute of Deaf and Blind would be, in the Math and Sciences School, would also be able to participate in this program. They are not eligible under the $360 million capital improvement program that's separate from this. So this would clarify their participation in this. There's also an amendment that would require that when these applications are made to the Lieutenant Governor's office, that a member of the Senate and a member of the House for that particular project must both co-sign the application. Now, the way the program is designed is that there will be a scoring system. The intent of this is to try to help schools that maybe do not have the local funds or do not have the ability to raise sufficient capital for some projects. And so it's anticipated that most of this will be directed into the more rural areas or the underserved areas of the state. But again, it would require there'll be an application, there'll be a scoring system, and one of those criteria would be the needs and the ability and the lack or the ability of the matching by the local school system. And again, we'll have amendments that will address some of the other concerns. Any questions or comments? Okay, Representative Collins.
I don't know if I can do them together or not, but
let's do them separately.
Okay, to offer the amendment for Senate Bill 269 regarding both the House and the Senate representatives applying for the grant.
Representative Collins has made a motion and second by Representative Keel. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Bill, the minute's adopted. We have another amendment.
I'll offer that one as
Representative
well. Senate Bill 269, and it's including the School of Math and Science, Fine Arts, and Cyber Technology, and also the deaf and blind.
Second by Representative Faulkner. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
So now the bill is amended. Any discussion, or I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Motion by Representative
amended.
Daniels. Second, Representative Baker. All in favor say aye. Aye. Bill's given a favorable report. Thank you. We'll next come to SB 101, which are amendments or changes to the Rolling Reserve Act. There are there's a public hearing on this and also an amendment. So I might actually, I'll give an overview, and then also we have our fiscal officers are here that they can actually answer some more technical questions here. But what this bill will do, and I'll just go down what it does, it amends the Rolling Reserve Act to define excess revenue as a difference in total revenue deposited into the ETF in the prior fiscal year, less total ETF appropriations for the same fiscal year. It sets a secondary spending limit for annual appropriations from 106.5% of the prior year appropriation in 2024, reducing by 0.5% thereafter until it floors at 105%. So basically what happens is this year, the budget, regardless of what the cap calculation is, and there's a calculation we go through that determines what our cap to spending would be, this would introduce another limitation that would be basically tied to the prior year budget. And for this year, it would allow the budget to grow 6.5%, and then that would step down to eventually the cap would be 105% of the prior year budget. So that's a secondary spending cap. It would also provide that in the calculation of the cap, as you know, excuse me, right now we have a 15-year calculation. You take the average, the budget for the revenues for the 15 years, and you drop the low year. This would drop the low and the high year to get a different average for that. That's might have been an issue with some of the committee members. And then it also creates a new fund, and this is an Educational Opportunities Reserve Fund. Some people call this a savings account. And what this would do would be to allow that fund would be established based upon a waterfall effect from all the other calculations, funding that would go into this account. This account would be accessible to the legislature apart from proration. Right now, to get to the rainy day accounts or to get to the budget stabilization account, it requires the governor to declare proration. This would allow for a savings account that the legislature could access to do a number of things. It would. We'll discuss those as well. But we could do it. We could access that account without having to go through proration. Now, the caveat on this would be that the fund has to first have a balance of $300 million. So in the current budget that's before you right now, the number is just shy of $300 million. The Senate budget that came down had about a $500 million savings account. Right now, we're just below the $300 million. Once you have $300 million, that fund can be then utilized for budgetary purposes. Once it goes below 300, it can be used. In other words, it's got to be 300 to access the account, but then thereafter you can tap into it as you need to. That provides a new allocation of excess revenues in 2024 beginning as follows. The Budget Stabilization Fund will be up to 1% of the prior year's ETF appropriations until the fund reaches 10% of the previous ETF appropriations. Next to the Advancement Technology Fund, and 50% of the remaining excess revenues not to exceed 1% in any fiscal year. And then the final would be 20% of the remaining would then would go into this new savings account, and any remaining excess remains in the ETF as non-recurring revenues. So the idea would be that we would make some modifications to have a secondary spending cap on our budget, which would give us the ability to control the rate at which we spend, we would create a new savings account that would be accessible should we need to tap into that for a variety of reasons. And that could be really, for your revenue shortfalls, if we had something like the like the Numeracy Act or Literacy Act, something like that, we need to make an injection and not want to go in and have to rob from somewhere else in the budget. It would give us the ability to address needs like that. So with that, I guess we can, Kurt, I'm going to defer to you. Is there anything that you would like to, have I left out anything or anything that you might want to add to that?
No, you got it covered. I think the big thing is for everybody to understand, this is at least attempting to address some of the shortfalls in the current Rolling Reserve Act, as have been highlighted over the past couple of years with the extraordinary growth that we've seen due to a lot of the federal money and everything that's going on. The cap calculation itself starts with the prior year's receipts. So if you've got extraordinary receipts and you calculate a cap on top of that, it gives you a number that you're not going to spend to. Well, the way the Rolling Reserve Act works, if you don't spend to the cap, there's this large amount of extra money, but it doesn't have a home. In other words, it winds up being your beginning balance, and you have to do what you're doing right now with the supplemental appropriation bill. This is an attempt to at least give it a home or take care of some of that, where it goes places like the Advancement in Technology Fund and the new reserve fund that you can access for future needs.
So I think the Rolling Reserve Act was one of the, I think, greatest pieces of legislation ever, because it's helped us to avoid proration and given us some very good financial discipline in our budgetary process. It did not contemplate those scenarios we've been through the last several years. And I just know that 1 year, I guess, going back, I can't remember which year it was, we had, the budget was $7.6 billion, but the cap calculation, because of all the federal money that was infused and all the COVID relief money and whatnot, the cap calculation was $9 billion. Obviously, we were not going to go from 7.6 and spend 9 just because we could, but that Rolling Reserve Act allowed us to make one-time, like, non-recurring adjustments. So we made those adjustments to where we got to a budget that we felt like we could grow, which was, again, we're looking at you're looking at all these calculations. We grow 5%, 3%, 2%. We kind of came to the point of what reasonable growth would be, backing out non-recurring items, and we got to a budget of about $8.2, $8.3 billion. Well, then the following year comes along, and now the cap is above $9 billion. Again, we can continue to grow, but you can't make those non-recurring one-time adjustments again. So we were in this situation where it just introduced a scenario that we had never contemplated. So this is attempting to address that and gets us back to the point of our mindset where the budget, we think we need to be disciplined and we grow, and ultimately that growing 5% a year sounds like a good place to start. And we're, at the same time, creating fund that we can access should we need to do them for shortfall. So that's the theory behind it. Thank you. Representative Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like that. Having served during those low years where we were regularly having proration and Rolling Reserve adjusted that, but also taking off the low but taking off the high as well. I think that's a great thing. I do think that all of this extraordinary revenue is going to run out eventually, and it's going to run out at our local communities about the same time as it runs out at the state. And so having a little reserve and extra places that we have put money away to help us slide into those low points, I think is very, very wise. And so did you say there was an amendment?
There is an amendment. Is it in your?
I don't see it, but I'm willing to offer it.
It's the very beginning of the packet, I think.
Oh, at the beginning.
Let's make sure we read what the amendment says, each line. So
someone else may need to offer it then.
Do you want to do that? Representative Keel.
So the amendment, and you're going to read the whole thing?
Yeah, let's read.
All right, here we go.
People understand.
Replace line 11 on page 1 with the following: the 2022 regular session in section 2995, Code of Alabama 1975, relating to the Education Trust Fund. Replace line 17 on page 1 with the following: funding and appropriations from the fund to revise the allowable uses of withdrawals from the budget stabilization fund to eliminate temporary loans for repairs and to repeal. Replace line 22 on page 1 with the following: the 22 regular session, section 2995, Code of Alabama 1975 are hereby amended to read as: replaces line 314 through 315 on page 12 with the following purposes only: to offset a reduction in revenues to the Education Trust Fund that could negatively impact funding for budgeted obligations from the Education Trust Fund. Replace lines 317 through 319 on page 12 with the following. Have we got the computer like Clay, has got Can we turn that on?
Yeah.
Finance and the legislative fiscal officer to provide funding for unanticipated obligations. And this section basically gives power to the finance and legislative fiscal officer. The next section, replace line 329, expenditures other than as specified and above, provided however funds may be appropriated. And then we strike lines 343, we strike except as provided in section 29.3 and in subdivision amounts. And then down to amounts in the Education Trust Fund, all the lines following there to the end of the amendment.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the amendment?
Second.
Amendment's been seconded by Representative Collins. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Before we get into discussion further, we do have a public hearing on this, so Ryan Hollingsworth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Walking up here with an amendment, I don't really know what you just did, so maybe you address some of these. If not, then maybe you can later. With School Superintendents of Alabama, certainly my first 3 years as superintendent, I experienced proration, FY 9, 10, and 11. So this act, this law, has prevented that from happening again. So great job here with this body for addressing that concern. As a local superintendent, very concerned if there is a balance of funds here in Montgomery without very specific uses for those. So this created the Advancement in Technology Fund. So as we look at that in the law, there are 7 very specific reasons that you can use the advancement in technology money for. And you all appropriate that usually every year. This year not, and then one other year I think we did not do that. Most of the time that is addressed. So this, without proration having been declared since it passed, this law works. So you have a cap that over a 15-year average and tweaking that to some degree, that will prevent that from happening. If we look back at the last, I think there's a cap of 5% growth that would be placed on this. In the last 27 years looking at revenue, I think the growth has exceeded 5% 13 of those 27 years. So you by your rolling reserve average of 15 years, you have a cap. I believe the finance director and the fiscal office also give you an estimate, and you've kind of used that. So when you say that it has been very unusual the last couple of years, but that doesn't prevent you, with the way the current law reads, doesn't prevent you from being very cautious and very conservative as it is now. And you have done that. And we are in a great position with our education budget compared to other states. And you've not been having to make cuts, and you've been able to fund things going forward. I'm very concerned about the new account. I know there was some language added that tightened up the usage just a little bit, but we would like that to be very specific. When we look at the last couple of years of supplemental bill that this legislature is considering this year and passed last year, K-12 has not fared very well in that supplemental. This year, what came out of the Senate, K-12 is only getting like 27% out of the supplemental. So in the A&T account, there is a split between K-12 and higher ed that is defined and ties it back to what's in the budget. Our concern would be if there's not that kind of language in this new account, and then you have a pot of money that could be split and we would not fare so well. So we would like to see some language to tighten that up just a little bit, Mr. Chairman, and would certainly be able to help address that. On the reserve piece, I'll hurry. Reserve piece, we've got a lot of money sitting here now, right? So we got stabilization account that's got $572 million in it. A&T's got $750, and you've got a supplemental bill before you that's $2.8 billion that is unappropriated revenues. So if you add all those up, that's $4.1 billion that's available if you need it. And I know there's strings attached to it, but that is like 50% of our annual budget. Now think about that. So if I'm in a local school district, I have to have a 1-month reserve. We're sitting on a 6-month reserve. And we have needs, all kind of needs, and I'm sure our members have expressed those to you. So there's our concerns, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Hollingsworth. I would like to recognize Kirk to just kind of go over the amendment in more technical detail, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry. The reading of the amendment had a whole lot of technical stuff in it that it's just you have to delete a line and replace it with information. Basically, the gist of the amendment was to provide more clarity, as Ryan indicated, with regard to the spending of the reserve fund, what it can be used for, to take out the 2% provision. There was a requirement that revenue had to decline by 2% in order to access it. This takes out the 2% requirement and says you can access it if revenues decline that would inhibit your ability to fund current year's operations. So think of it this way, your budget stabilization fund can only be accessed if in fact your budget, you have to declare proration. You can only get to it that way. This would give you a fund that you could access to keep things where they were. The language was changed also to where you could address in future years, let's say some of these big investments that you've made in the numeracy and the principal and the Literacy Act that require increased appropriations every year just to keep up, the TEAMS program. So you have a year where revenues flatline and you can't make that obligation the next year. This is a way for you to access some money to be able to maintain those increased obligations that you've got. And to address one big thing that amendment did is it inserted unexpected expenditures. What that is intended to capture is a situation like you had a few years back, and the reason the Budget Stabilization Fund was amended to allow a loan provision for unnecessary or natural disasters and things like that. This is basically you could allow that to be funded through this without having to get into the Budget Stabilization Fund. The other part of that amendment is it takes out that loan provision in the Budget Stabilization Fund altogether. So that's not going to be on the table anymore because you've got this other fund that you could access to straighten that out.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Entertain a motion. Motion by Representative Collins for the favorable report as amended. Second, Representative Faulkner. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Bill's given a favorable report. Thank you. So next we come to the budget, and there is a substitute. I think, can we get the substitute on the table, then I'll walk through the budget changes? Representative Collins' motion for adopt a sub. Second by Representative Lovern. All in favor say aye. All opposed? So now we're looking at SB 88, which is the budget. And you have spreadsheets before you, and what I will do is walk through and attempt to explain let me get organized a minute. I'll address the changes that were made to the Senate bill by the House budget. So what the Senate, basically when the budget came over from the governor's office, they had spent the 6.5%. So it was all the 6.5% money was the growth in the budget was 6.5%. They'd spent the money, and so what the Senate did was to take the $25 million basically of broadband line item and reallocate that to other areas of the budget. So they didn't decrease necessarily anything else generally from the other items, but they took the $25 million. The reason for that was because there's been a substantial amount of investment into broadband from other sources, from the rescue plan, from the CARES Act, the other appropriations. So there's been like probably, I don't know, $300 or $400 million going to the broadband effort. So the idea was that broadband need is being addressed from other pots, so the $25 million was reallocated. But that spent all the money. So then we came to the House, and so what we've done, I'll go through the changes that we've made in the House budget. Number one, we added $106,000 to line 98, which is the Cyber Technology Excel program for K-12 schools. This is something that we've done in conjunction with Alette, who's made presentations before the committee. So that gives them additional money. We also have added $400,000, actually $450,000 into the at-risk programs. This is line 120. Two of these programs are here in Montgomery. I've collaborated with Representative Ensler and Representative Hassel about two programs. One would be a pilot program in the Montgomery High School dealing with career direct certification. And the need here is that a lot of these students who really don't have, are not sure what they want to do after high school. They really have no direction about what career they should pursue, what type of work they should pursue. And so this is a program meeting with a counseling organization these students would take an assessment, and then the assessment results would be revealed to them and discussed with them, and they would have some direction. For example, maybe you should go work in the retail industry. Maybe your aptitude is over here. Maybe your interest is in a different field. But to try to give them some path to see if they can get some direction for getting a job after high school and what field might interest them. So it's a pilot program, and we think it's a big need. So that's $200,000 would go to fund that pilot program. And another pilot program with Representative Ensler is involved with in Montgomery schools would be with conflict resolution. And this is an issue that I think would be just something worthy of a pilot program. So we've added $400,000 to the at-risk program for that. We've increased the line item 123 for Jones Valley Teaching Farm. This is in Birmingham, a group that does is an agricultural. They grow food. They have culinary people that come in and teach the kids about the whole food system. They run businesses. They have a lot of neat things going on, and that program's really grown. So we've added $50,000 there. We've deleted line 219, which is the principal mentoring program, $438,000. This was the old mentoring program. You'll recall that we have passed, or in the budget, we passed a. Have we passed that bill yet? But there's a new mentoring. Yeah, Representative Baker carried the school principal mentoring program, $850,000, which Representative Baker carried. That bill will replace what this effort was. So we're moving this line item. Added $500,000 to Gifted Students Grant Program. They had gone for several years, not had an increase. We gave them an increase last year, bumping them another $500,000 this year. $100,000 on line 316 to increase the Humanities Foundation. Then on line 374, special earmark to the Southwest Alabama ARC. This is the ARC that Representative Estabrook is involved with. The ARC formula is very complicated and complex. I think it needs work. I think in some cases not necessarily following the formula, but there's some places, a situation, there's a particular need in that area that he's been really convinced all of us that there's a problem there, that they're getting shorted in this calculation. So actually I've made a special allocation of $34,907 to that ARC to support some deficiencies there. We also have, the Senate sent down, there were two programs that had to do with residency programs in rural areas using residents from the UAB system and the USA system to go into rural areas and do residencies in the rural areas. The thinking is, and the evidence shows, that those who do residencies in those rural areas tend to stay there or go back to those areas. So this, again, is our theme of trying to address the rural healthcare access. The Senate there were two programs. We're now basically just putting one program, $800,000, which would fund 5 residents in Bibb County. Was where it would be hubbed out of Bibb County through the Cahaba Clinic, which is affiliated with the UAB program. And so this is a program to fund that residency program. We also have added $50,000 to a new line item for the officials organizations. And then our high school athletics, we're having labor participation issues all across the country. We certainly have that in the officiating for all of our high school sports. Many of you probably go to high school games. You probably complain about officials, but there's a lot more complaints now because it's hard to get people, and we're not really paying them much. So this is a line item to actually help that effort there. So those were really the substantial changes to the budget line items. Again, not significant, but there wasn't a whole lot to spread around. I will say, too, that Senator Orr and I had worked together on both the supplemental and the budget as the Senate developed theirs so that we could try to get to a point to where we would have as few disagreements as possible. So much of what was in the Senate budget, we had reflected some comments that some of you had made to me because I'd pass those along, and I think every comment I made, every suggestion I made was incorporated into that Senate budget, and these are additional items that we've identified. So I'll be happy to answer questions. I'll point out that the split from the governor's office had K-12 at 67.92. The Senate version was 68.06. The House version is 68.07. Higher ed was 25.6 in the governor. Senate was 25.67. The House is 25.65. And the other categories were 6.47 in the governor, 6.27 in the Senate, 6.28 in the House. So the higher ed split, and when you just look at combine the higher ed and just break it down 2 ways, in the governor's office, 72.62 was K-12, 27.38 was higher ed, Senate was 72.61, House was 72.63, and the higher ed was 27.38 for the governor, 27.39 for the Senate, 27.37 for the House. Questions, comments? Representative Stubbs?
Appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate all the hard work that's been put forth by you and many others and our colleagues in the Senate with regards to the budget. I would be remiss if I did not, express some concern with, and there are a lot of areas obviously we all are familiar with in shortfalls, but I do think that we need to generate a comprehensive plan to address the divisor issue with grades, specifically grades 4 through 8. We have them categorized as grades 4 through 6 and then 7 and 8. I am not sure the history of the calculations of divisors, but to anyone it would be obvious that grades 4 through 8 are not in sync with K through 3 and 9 through 12. I think we're making tremendous efforts in the middle school, junior high age range to engage students in various programs, robotics, music, all of these other great activities that we want them to be engaged and participate in, but we're not equipping our schools with the staff necessary because of the divisors, especially our schools that don't have additional local funding, that are just foundation schools. They're not able to staff those programs that are engaging students and keeping kids in school and keeping them interested in what's going on. So I do know that we made a modest change in one of those categories this year, but I hope that we can look at this as a comprehensive approach over, it's not something that's fixed overnight, but something that can be addressed over the years to better equip our schools for those situations. Thank you.
Those are good points. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I will point out that in the governor's budget, there was, we saw an effort last year to begin looking particularly at these areas of highest need, thus the Numeracy Act, the Literacy Act, things that we've done to try to address the teacher shortages, the things we've tried to do to put additional resources into the classroom, things we've done to try to put auxiliary teachers. All of those type things have continued or been augmented or increased in this budget. So we're continuing with that focus and that effort, and hopefully we'll see continued good results from things like that. Any other questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion. Representative Daniels, comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that, this year was very good for us from a budgetary standpoint, but I just want to make certain that I mentioned that there are some areas that I think that we certainly need to look at from an improvement standpoint, especially in higher education institutions that continue to have age-old buildings and a lot of deferred maintenance issues. We have to certainly take into consideration the growing increase in construction costs that I see, some investments made from the budget that was sent down from the Senate, additional in the supplemental, that's reflected in the supplemental, and very modest increases in the overall budget. I would like to see long-term see us make more investments. If we're expecting these institutions to be able to continue to recruit the best and brightest, we have to make certain that the age-old buildings and the crumbling infrastructure that they have, we got to make certain that we're making investments there. And I think that from an institution standpoint, they have to prioritize what's going to yield the returns that we need long-term as a state. Technology is the area that I think a lot of more investments need to be made in our technology infrastructure. And as we're recruiting industry, whether it's cyber and then going on into some of the areas that are growing in agriculture, like from the medical marijuana and other areas, I do think we have to double down and make more investments in these institutions to make certain that they could remain competitive, but even be more competitive long term. Some institutions, I'll name the institution that's in my area, Alabama A&M University, who had record numbers of enrollment this year, but they're in the city of Huntsville. The housing market in Huntsville is booming. It's becoming more unaffordable for juniors and seniors and graduate students to be able to live within the city limits. But institutions are built to really have freshmen and sophomores on campus. And so we got to look at helping and partnering with them on putting more investments in housing on their campus and utilizing the land that they currently have to help make those housing more affordable and more accommodating for the current students and future students. Otherwise, they can't reach their capacity and their full potential if we don't make these investments. And so that's something that's glaring from this budget. Other items that I think is very critical. I know that there are dollars in for a study for the Black Belt for the school, the health science school. I think that as we make investments in innovation across the state of Alabama, and mostly in urban areas, that these rural areas have the same intellectual capacity and ability than our urban areas and suburban areas. And so I think that as we are making future investments, I know that the Senate kind of took their bite at the apple first, and I just hope that we learn from I wouldn't say there are mistakes, but I do think that there's a lot of short-sightedness in what was sent to us because a person in rural Alabama has the same abilities as those that are in urban and suburban areas, and I don't think necessarily the budget is reflective of that. And so that's something that greatly concerns me. I see a number of projects that's within the budget that's going in certain areas of the state of Alabama. I do think, Chairman, you've done a good job of trying to make some adjustments to those, and those are glaring. But I do think that these conversations have to begin now. I also ask that all of our institutions, and from a higher education standpoint, continue to be innovative and be more forward thinking and figuring out ways that we can even improve on the infrastructure. If we're competing from a commerce standpoint with other states and we're at the point that we're where we need to be, and we just increase that cap this year of showing that we're serious about recruiting and retaining industry in the state of Alabama, we have to do the same thing with our investments in higher education, making certain that from a technology standpoint, it's going to be higher overhead, but we have to make those investments. And in K-12, as a gentleman mentioned earlier, I do think that I am concerned and very disappointed that there are no dollars reflective in addressing those schools that are underperforming. I think that if we're going to solve any problems in this state, that we have to put more resources and more research-based and evidence-based practices in these areas that are underperforming, and not just continue to allow them to underperform year after year. And so we just got to raise the level on all areas. And I just think that when we're making these investments, we got to think about what's going to make Alabama even better tomorrow. And I just think that some of the things that are here is just not reflective of that. But I certainly appreciate the chairman for making some adjustments to the budget. But I just think that from what was sent down to us, I don't think that there's been enough investments. And I understand about the savings account. But at some point, we're going to have to use those for, it is a rainy day. We're in a rainy day right now, where if our schools are underperforming, our infrastructure is crumbling, and construction costs are increasing, the dollars we're giving them right now is not going to go as far as we need them to go. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's all the comments that I have, but I just want to make certain that we're thinking about these things.
Thank you. Any other comments? I have a motion for favorable report by Representative Keel. Second, Representative Collins. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, bill's given a favorable report. Thank you. Welcome. Okay. All right. That takes us now to SB 87, which is a supplemental appropriation bill. There is a substitute, so I would entertain a motion to get the sub on the table. Representative Hill makes a motion to adopt the sub. Second, Representative Almond. All in favor say aye. All opposed? So we have the supplemental appropriation bill on the table. You have the sub, you have the sheet before you. I'll just walk through these items, and let me get organized a second. Hold on. You know, I made the comment way back when that in my business career, you always made the worst decisions when you had a lot of money. And, you know, we've got $2.7 billion here to allocate. I will say that it's been very much a challenge. I know it was for Director Poole. I know it was for Senator Orr. Senator Orr told me this was probably the most challenging situation he's ever encountered, but it just was so much funds. How do you invest it? What do you do? And what do we do to address a lot of the issues that Representative Daniels brought up? And so we were tempted to do that. We're also, and when you do this, you're trying to maintain the geographical balance around the state. And I do have a map I think I've shown that shows that we've attempted to do that. And I think in the ETF supplemental, which those, I don't know if those have been passed out to the members or not. Karen, do you have those or no? They're in the binder, okay. There's a map that shows you the geographic distribution of what I'm about to go over in the supplemental. And it basically, I think there's a few tweaks to this map that would maybe shift a few things a little bit, but not major. You don't have a map?
No.
Okay. Okay.
The maps are in for the caucus meetings.
Yeah, well, I brought it for here as well, but basically what I'll show the members, and we'll get copies, but we basically got the state divided into quadrants, and we're showing there the amount of the investments and the amount of the population. There's a number of ways you can slice and dice this, and again, we're trying to just we want to make sure we're trying to be fair and equitable in how we distribute the funds. So that's what we're attempting to do. These maps, which we'll give you a copy of those to make sure you have that. And again, I think there's a few tweaks here and there. But having said that, I'll go through the line items in the supplemental and talk about the changes. It's a lot of money. So the first change was, as again, the governor had recommended a $966 million rebate. The Senate cut that to $275 million. The House has taken that back to $550 million. So that's doubling the rebate that the Senate had. That's again $210 per person, $420 per couple, and that's in the supplemental. We made no change to the debt service payoff from either the governor or the Senate. Department of Risk Management, the Senate made a $10 million change, which we maintained in the House. In the Department of Education, we actually added the Senate added $4.7 million, and I believe that was for the new school system down in South Alabama, the Orange Beach area, I believe, to make sure that that calculation that trued that up. So we maintained that change. Fleet renewal, we maintained the Senate change of $20 million for renewal buses around the state. Classroom support, we maintained we actually the Senate added a pre-funding of classroom support, so $20 million. What we found out was every year as we increase the amount of money that goes into the classrooms, because the fiscal year and the timing of school and whatnot, that money's not available until later in the year after school starts. So what we've attempted to do here is pre-fund the half year so that they have that money and those materials when school starts. So we maintain that change in the Senate. The capital fund of $360 million that was there it's described as the capital inflationary fund to take care of capital projects that have been subject to inflationary increases. We amended the language in that, as the Senate did, to allow for that to be used for A&T purposes. So we expanded the usage of that money. The governor had allocated $150 million to rural school systems for high-need capital improvements. We reallocated that, and this is the Lieutenant Governor Fund we talked about in a minute, and I'll go through that later on in the program, but we've basically maintained with the Senate. We've made some changes to what the Senate did on that. I'll discuss those later. We maintained the changes the Senate made on the Teacher Liability Trust Fund. We maintained what the Senate and the governor proposed on charter schools, $10 million. The other changes we made was school safety grants. The governor had proposed $10 million. The Senate took that to $40 million, and we maintained that. So a $30 million increase in school safety grants. The Sabin Discovery Center, the governor proposed $25 million. The Senate cut that to $15 million. We've restored that $25 million in the supplemental. We've done it in a couple of pots, $17 million or $2 million increase on this line item. In addition, the University of Alabama is taking $8 million out of their appropriation to help fund that difference. So that Sabin Discovery Center, which is a museum but also a STEM teaching hub that will become, we think, a model for regional teaching hubs, STEM teaching hubs around the state. And State Department's very involved in that, so we're supportive of that effort and have fully funded that. The Senate added American Village Independence Hall to their budget to complete the construction of the Independence Hall at American Village. We've maintained that. We also added $1 million to support the Troy Civic Center, the Troy Civics partnership they have with American Village. We see the American Village and then the Troy program as being something that would be productive for us going forward in civics education around the state. So we want to support this. So we've added $1 million to that effort. The Senate added $200,000, which we maintain for the Holocaust Commission traveling exhibit. We have added $2 million to the Ed Farm allocation. Ed Farm, of course, is very involved in the technology and computer science and STEM activities around the state, primarily focused in rural areas and underserved areas. They are getting a $2 million A&T appropriation because we're not doing A&T this year, but yet utilizing that $360 million fund that's available to the schools. But Ed Farm does not have the ability to tap into that $360 million program. So we're basically allowing them to continue their work through this $2 million appropriation there, which we've added. We added $1.75 million to provide tornado reconstruction relief for the Selma City schools. They had requests that were probably about $1 million, $1.3 million, but we've actually added $1.75 million to help with the construction of those schools that were damaged. I think there's 4 entities in particular, but also they will be able to access the Lieutenant Governor's Fund, as we discussed earlier. We've added $100,000 to Mobile County Schools cerebral palsy services at the request of some members. We added $300,000 to the Woolley Institute, the hearing program. A lot of members had interest and support for that program. We added $250,000 for the Alabama Symphony Orchestra, again, at the request of some members. We've added, so basically the Earth Innovation Center under the Department of Commerce, we maintain the Senate appropriation for that development over into East Alabama. Now, notice that the Senate had removed the 3 items, the Mobile Port Authority, the Port of Alabama, the Montgomery County Commission. We have addressed the Port Authority and the Mobile Airport Authority and the Port of Alabama in the general fund substitute that's being worked on right now in the Senate and also here. I'll describe further here, but in discussions with the general fund, Senate representative and the Speaker and the Pro Tem, we needed to find a way to provide some support. So we have done that here in the budget. I'll discuss that through the community college system. I'll discuss that shortly. The Senate had increased the earmark for the Lauderdale County Commission from $12 million to $15 million. We've restored back to where the governor was at $12 million. World Games, we've maintained what the Senate did was to delete that line item. In the Site Development Fund, the governor proposed $10 million, the Senate took it to $40 million, and we've maintained that $40 million. So there's a $30 million increase in Site Development Fund. The next change would be the long COVID study. The Senate added $5 million for a long COVID study by a group in Birmingham. We've removed that study. UAB is doing a long COVID study, and we removed that $5 million item from the long COVID study. We've maintained the increases for the specialty schools from $3 million by the governor up to $6 million for each of those. We've maintained those. We made no changes under the Commission on Higher Education from what the Senate had proposed, which was additional funding for the Talent Retention Initiative, National Guard scholarships, USS Battleship, outcomes-based funding, Southern Museum of Flight, Brightest and Best STEM program, deferred maintenance at the Reengage Alabama, which we'll talk about that in the next bill. Another bill in the package. We took $5 million to add to the Birmingham Zoo Alabama Veterinary Teaching Hospital. This is that's the only accredited zoo in the state, and they're building a veterinary teaching hospital, which they do not have right now. And this will utilize students from 3 of our veterinary schools around the veterinary students from 3 schools around the state. We've added $1 million for the Forestry Workforce Training Institute in Bibb County. This is a program to develop workforce training for that industry. We've added is that right? Okay. This looked different on the spreadsheet I last saw, but that's correct. $7 million for the Tuskegee one-time deferred maintenance program. We've maintained the Senate appropriation of a $10 million increase for Alabama A&M. Maintained the Senate increase of $5 million for Alabama State. Again, the University of Alabama has, we've increased their appropriation, which they are contributing to the Saban Center. University of Alabama at Birmingham added $8 million for deferred maintenance for their program. Maintained the Senate increase of $29 million for UAH. We've added $600,000 in the House to the Athens State for one-time expenses. Maintained the, we've added $8 million, we've maintained the Senate appropriation for Auburn. Jacksonville State, we've added $500,000 for the Painted Rock Research Studies. This is a program that's used in that area, which would use also Jacksonville State students as well as Alabama A&M students. But that program, for that funding of that program, would be under this Jacksonville State. Added $1 million for one-time expenses, University of Montevallo. Added $2.5 million one-time expenses for University of North Alabama. University of South Alabama, we've added $2.3 million for renovation and equipment needs for a band rehearsal complex. In addition to the other, so we maintained the changes that were made by the governor and the Senate. University of West Alabama, we've added $275,000 for the Cahaba Biodiversity Center's facility renovation at the request of some members. I see, here's this Tuskegee shift. That's what I was looking for. That's the shift. That's the, okay, I just reclassed it, I got. Under the community college system, so we maintain the, the Senate added $3 million for the prison education facilities. We maintained that. We added, so the healthcare initiative, this is a program using community colleges to train healthcare workers throughout the system. The Senate had $35 million. We have reduced that to $31 million. We have kept deferred maintenance, deferred maintenance for the community college system at $5 million, which was down from what the Senate had left, $26 million. So basically what happened, some of the changes that we've made, additions we made, we reduced the deferred maintenance that was in the community college system to get to some of these other line items. Added $1 million to the Innovation Center, Dunn University. This is a program where they do workforce development and training for industry, for a variety of trades around the state. And then, we went to a series of adding capital projects throughout the state at all the community colleges. So basically what we did was we took a lot of the Main Street money, in theory, that was going to be spent in town squares or communities, and reallocated that directly to the community colleges all across the state. And these were for a variety of projects that were submitted by the community college system. There's support for each of these levels, but they're all supported there. We did increase Bishop State from $15 million to $21 million. Part of that funding, part of that increase will be going toward infrastructure improvements with their Center of Aviation Excellence, which is related to the Mobile Airport issue. The same with Coastal Alabama, their Center of aviation excellence. We've also added $1 million for Bishop State that will be going toward a program under the Mobile Area Education Foundation, which is a complex with a charter school and also with some other workforce and career training for students in that area. $1 million toward that appropriation running through Bishop State. We maintain the appropriations for the C Lab project, I call it. Added $750,000 to the Space Science exhibition. This is primarily for provide minority students space camp scholarships. With the Educational Opportunities Run, the savings account, the Senate had $500 million. In the House version, we've reduced that to $279,250,000. The Lieutenant Governor's Grant Program, the Senate was $180 million. That's now down to $104 million in the House version. Historic Commission grants, we've added $75,000. That's for the Jesse Owens Memorial in the northwest portion of Alabama. We've added $250,000 for the feasibility study for the residency school, healthcare residency school in the state. We also amended the language to say that would be that the Black Belt location would be a part of the feasibility study, and also we've shifted the responsibility of contracting for that study from the public examiners to LSA. We've added funding for the East Alabama Academy, which is a mental health education facility located within a hospital. We've added money for Holinsky's Hope, about $500,000 for Holinsky's Hope, which is a mental health program that we wanted to help support that effort to help students with the mental health, students who really are having mental health issues that are really afraid to go forward. This was really, the Holinsky's, as you know, was a football player that committed suicide. His family learned of his issues after the fact. So this program is directly trying to address students in that type of situation. We passed legislation dealing with providing law enforcement with sensory bags for educational training. There was a lot of discussion on the floor about this. This is actually funding to provide those kits for the law enforcement. Then also we've added $500,000 to support a dental clinic in Dothan. That brings the total appropriation of $2.7 million. Just reallocated really what the Senate reallocated what the governor had proposed. We allocated what the Senate proposed, but we've allocated all the money. So I entertain, and again, a lot of people had a lot of requests. We had a lot more requests than $2.7 billion, as you can imagine. We've tried to move to the point that we can address as many needs as we can, and with the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish as a legislature. And also, you'll have the map before you, but we believe we've equitably distributed the funds around the state. Yes, sir. Representative Faulkner.
I noticed a lot in here. I mean, I don't know what the total amount would be if you added it up, but on deferred maintenance, I mean, it's just throughout, particularly with regard to our institutions. So I'm assuming that is something that it's got deferred maintenance, renovation, et cetera. I'm assuming that means that these institutions want the money in that form or allocated in that way. And I was just going to get you to comment for me, because I didn't recognize that in the past. How, have we done that a lot in the past? And can you just comment on the?
Well, I think this speaks to a lot. This speaks to a lot of what I think Representative Daniels was alluding to earlier about the deferred maintenance, the crumbling infrastructure, the old buildings, the things are just antiquated. Things are not up to, in some cases, up to current code, or not, up to the capacity of their students. Typically, when we make allocations to O&M or things like that, they're for the operations of universities. We rarely have the funds to set aside a lot for these capital needs. So basically, the deferred maintenance is a way for us to give money to the universities unencumbered for those type issues they can use as they see need. Other questions or comments? Representative Stubbs.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. I'd just like to highlight, I think we've made an effort with regards to K through 12. I think in light of Representative Faulkner's comments on a lot of the deferred maintenance comments with a lot of our higher education institutions across the state, two of which I have degrees from and have seen some of those issues myself. But I do want to make sure that we're constantly aware of some of the crumbling infrastructure in our K-12 schools. In my district, I have 2 high schools that are over 100 years old. And as we consider that and consider the efforts being made to kind of piecemeal something together to put our K through 12 students in a position of success and the faculty and staff that is serving them, I think we have the inflationary increase in capital project and equipment costs of $360 million in this budget, in the supplemental appropriations, which I'm sure will assist many of those institutions in their capital projects that they've already engaged in. But I'm not sure that that's going to be enough to finish all of those things. And so as we move forward in especially next year, if we anticipate a supplemental budget that may not be to this extent, but we do know that we've had a little bit of slowdown in receipts recently, but we've had enough months of high numbers to give us a reasonable supplemental budget next year that may also continue with the deferred maintenance efforts in higher education, but also ensure that we're helping our K-12 schools get across the finish line on some of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Kirk, you have something you want to add?
Along those lines, if you pass the rolling reserve modification the way it is right now, you'll have the opportunity next year of looking at $1.8 billion roughly that you could appropriate from the Advancement and Technology Fund, and that money can be used for capital outlay. So, and deferred maintenance and all the above, it's split. So a lot of that would wind up going to K-12.
Any other comments or questions? Representative Faulkner?
Do you know, Kirk, how much we have allocated in here for deferred maintenance? I mean, I'm not opposed to this. I'm just, I just want to see the investment we're making in these capital improvements. Do you know what, if you added up all the deferred maintenance that we have line itemed, how much it'd be?
Well, we can pull that. Any other questions, comments? Reverend Daniels, you okay?
Well, no, I was going to try to understand the concern, if any, that Mr. Faulkner have regarding the deferred maintenance. Just trying to understand why we're drilling down on the deferred maintenance.
No concern. Areas. I thought I expressed that. I'm not opposed or to me, I just noticed it a lot, and I wondered how much we had been doing that in the past.
Well, I think we haven't been doing it. That's the problem.
Yeah,
we have a very limited amount.
So to me, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I was interested to see how much we're able to do. I think it's good that we're helping out all these, both K-12 and our higher ed institutions. But you can see how much there's a lot of money going to it, and I think that's important to note. That we're spending that, how much we're doing towards that this year. And I wondered how it compared to years past.
Well, from a construction standpoint, deferred maintenance is sometimes a lot more expensive than actually doing a new build. And so with some of the other laws that we have in place that prohibit us from being able to tear down a lot of these age-old facilities, deferred maintenance is the only course of action that these institutions have. And when you're rebuilding, the construction cost is sometimes a 10-20% increase more of being able to rebuild an existing infrastructure or modify it than to actually build new. And so there are barriers that we've put in place, Mr. Faulkner, that are preventing them from being able to kind of do. And so deferred maintenance is going to be a lot more than new construction.
Any other comments, questions? favorable report by Representative Keel, second Representative Lovern. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Bill's given a favorable report. Thank you. Next, we have a public hearing on HB 479. This is the grocery tax reduction. We have a couple of amendments, but I would like to, we do have a list of people who wish to speak. So we'll take these and let's speak for, we're going to lose a quorum here. No, wait.
I think we need to lose a quorum for this bill.
We're good. Okay. We're good. Let's keep our comments to 2 minutes, if you don't mind, guys. Ryan Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back when the session started, Mr. Chairman, you had a presentation about where we stand on taxes relative per capita in the country, and we're at the bottom. And so my ask of the committee and this legislature is at this time, we just take a pause and call a 30-second timeout or 2-minute warning, whatever you want to talk about, related to incentives, credits, tax cuts, because we're in a economy that is up because of federal dollars, and we know that's going away. So if you look at the average growth last 20 years, about 3.2%, I think is what Kirk shared. That would put our current revenue, a normal revenue, at about $8.96 billion. If you take the game plan that you've passed already and this tax cut and put those together, that's $500 million lost in the ETF on an annual basis. That's 6% of our current year's budget. That's a lot, and no replacement for that. So our ask is just hang on just a minute and take a look at that. There's a lot of other bills floating around. Matter of fact, you had one in here, I think maybe the first one today. And so we track those, and we have 4 pages of bills right now going through, it's already passed or in the legislature, that are incentives, credits, tax cuts. And I just ask you to be very cautious as you proceed to look at cuts to the ETF long term when we're looking at a temporary economy. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Robin Hayden, Alabama Rise.
Good morning. I'm here speaking in support of HB 479, and I want to say thank you to 100 House representatives, 35 senators supporting this proposal. For decades, Alabama Arise and our members have hosted community conversations and listening sessions around Alabama every summer to understand how we can build better opportunities for people to succeed and thrive. This priority on taxing groceries has long been at the top of the list to help regular, everyday working class folks who spend a disproportionate amount of our income on sales taxes like groceries. Last month, we were here with over 125 of our members and partners, but we represent 151 member groups and thousands of members around the state of Alabama. While we're not thrilled that this proposal does not immediately replace revenue, we've spoken about that before, we think the time is right to take this step now while we have funds available. We would love for you all to come back in future years to find ways to safeguard ETF revenue and replace the revenue loss so that we can fully untax 4% of the state grocery tax. So we urge you today to vote promptly to pass HB 479. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Allison King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee members. During last year's legislative session, you guys passed legislation that made 18 tax cuts to the ETF, totaling $160 million a year. This year, we currently have dozens of bills on the table for additional cuts with no avenue for replacement of the dollars. We've already passed House Bill 115 unanimously, which cut $82 million a year. This legislation would eliminate $600 million, or according to the website right now, $776 million, from the ETF over the next 4 years, and then additional $318 million annually after that. In a time with record surplus, cutting taxes seems to be a smart choice. However, we cannot allow short-term circumstances to cloud our judgment when we're making long-term decisions. The bill does put the requirement of a 2% growth in the ETF as a safety net, but that is not enough. In a year like this, it may seem substantial and adequate, but in lean years or years when we show negative growth, it certainly would not be sufficient. The rising cost of inflation, I understand, is a catalyst to this conversation, and I do know that we're one of only a few states that still assess sales tax on groceries, but we also must focus on one truth. All in all, collectively, Alabama is the second lowest tax state in the country. Many states may not have a grocery tax, but they have something we don't: substantial property taxes. AEA is not against cutting grocery taxes, but we are against cutting grocery taxes without an equally reliable funding source to replenish the lost revenue. If our state wants to consider additional taxes to put in place that would fund the ETF, we would consider supporting this legislation. Programs like literacy and numeracy will likely be cut because of this. These are programs that are working and moving us forward. The last 2 months of revenue have already shown a downturn, and the projections of an economic slowdown in the third and fourth quarters is imminent as well. I'll leave you with this. If we take away the grocery tax, which tax are we planning to raise in order to make up for these lost revenues? We need our future to look brighter, not more bleak. Our children deserve that from us. Thank you.
Stephanie Smith.
Good morning. Stephanie Smith with API. The first time I remember discussing the grocery tax was in John Knight's office, and I was 22 years old. So you can tell that's been almost 25 years ago. For over a decade, repealing the state's grocery tax has been a top priority for the Alabama Policy Institute. And as Allison just said, Alabama is one of only 3 states that still fully taxes all essentials. In 2022 alone, the average annual cost of groceries rose by 11.4% for Alabamians. That takes a toll on household budgets. Cutting the grocery tax will provide immediate relief to every single Alabama citizen. According to the USDA, a typical family of 4 spends $1,200 a month on a moderate grocery plan. I won't tell you how much we spend. I've got 5 boys. Cutting the grocery tax by 2% would equate to about $600 in annual savings for the average Alabama family. The benefits of reducing the grocery tax will be felt every single time Alabamians walk into a grocery store. Thank you to all of you on this committee who are co-sponsors of this bill. Every single senator signed on as a co-sponsor to the Senate version of the bill. Statewide polling has recently revealed that over 80% of registered voters across the state support a partial or full repeal of the grocery tax. This is truly a bipartisan bill. Over the past 5 years, state government has experienced unprecedented revenue growth, taking in more money last year and the year before and the year before than any other point in Alabama's more than 200-year history. You have a unique opportunity to use a small portion of the growth to provide direct and permanent relief for every single Alabama citizen today. We feel strongly that the time to do so is now. I would appreciate your support. Thank you for your time.
Baker Allen.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the committee for giving us the opportunity to address them today. I'm Baker Allen, Director of Policy and Research for the Alabama League of Municipalities. We are not opposed to the bill in its entirety, but we do have concerns about the impact on municipal decision making. Municipal officials are elected at the local level, and they are held accountable every 4 years, but they are elected to make those decisions at the local level. Currently, the bill prevents a municipality from raising its sales tax rate on food after lowering it. This is something, a power the state maintains, but does not grant to the municipality. This could have severe financial implications for those municipalities. The state has multiple revenue sources and collects from all across the state. Municipalities are limited specifically to a handful of particular taxes and are concentrated to what's going on in their community. Additionally, this could impact the recruitment of grocery stores. Municipalities use incentives to bring those grocery stores in. The way they make that math work is from the sales tax generated from those sales. The state does not come in and help recruit those types of grocery stores. On a final note, municipalities need the ability to make those local decisions and keep their sales tax uniform if they'd like. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellie Taylor's our last speaker.
Good morning, Chairman Garrett, members of the committee. I'm Ellie Taylor with the Alabama Grocers Association. I'm talking in favor, of course, of this bill. This is something that we have worked on for over a decade. She was talking about Representative John Knight earlier, and we were there when that bill was being passed as well. Daily grocers witness hardworking Alabamians unable to purchase the food that they need. Despite wages increasing significantly over the last several years, the rising cost of food has outpaced all other household expenses except for transportation. Factors including the labor shortage, supply chain disruption, energy prices, severe weather events, and the war in the Ukraine have all contributed to these rising prices. Alabama is one of only 3 states in the nation that do not reduce the sales tax on food, including 2 of our bordering states, Florida and Georgia, thus putting consumers across state lines to receive less of that tax burden. This is a regressive tax which disproportionately affects those with lower income. We know that states with the higher grocery tax rates also are the states with the highest rates of food insecurity. And according to the Alabama Department of Public Health, Alabama is the 5th poorest state in the nation, with 17% of adults and 23% of children, 1 in 4, facing food insecurity or a lack of regular access to nutritious food for an active, healthy lifestyle. For those low-income, elderly, or retired people with a fixed income, rent and mortgage and medicine come first, leaving little for the food budget and other more flexible expenses. And according to Feeding America, Alabama has the 2nd highest rate of food insecurity for seniors at 12.8%. The average family of 4 spends $1,000 a month on food at a minimum. Cutting the grocery tax would give each family a significant amount every month that could go to prescription copays, doctor's visits,
Thank you.
Other essentials.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good. So that concludes our public hearing. We now have the grocery tax. We have 2 amendments that I would like to offer. I'll just offer those in the interest of time, if that's okay for everybody. The first amendment would basically be to change the methodology. If you recall, the Lieutenant Governor, the bill that the Senate passed that Lieutenant Governor was initially supporting, removed the grocery tax of 2 cents over a 4-year period, 0.25% per year. It also looked back at the prior year budget for the growth standard. What this amendment will do will be to reduce the sales tax. I'll just read it. 4% of the grocery sales tax. On September 1, 2023, the tax rate shall be reduced to 3%. On September 1, 2025, the tax rate shall be reduced to 2% if the total tax receipts from all revenue sources Education Trust Fund for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2026 is at least 2% higher than the previous fiscal year, as certified by the Director of Finance, Legislative Officer, pursuant to section of the Code of Alabama. If the growth requirement is not satisfied for that year, the rate shall be reduced to 2% in a subsequent year when the growth rate is satisfied. So here's 2 things. One, we're taking 1% full 1% on September 1, 2023, and the second full 1% on September 1st, 2025. And the growth standard is not looking back, but looking forward at the revenue estimates, which is what we do when we look at the budget stabilization fund and whatnot. So that's the change here, would be to basically phase in it over in 2 1-cent slogs, and then doing a look forward. I will also say that we have taken, with the fiscal office, we've taken the current scenario we have with all of our funding. We've looked at the projected revenue, the budget, the spending, the reserves, all of that. We factored in a mild recession, and we believe that we are confident that we can handle this is proposed. So I'll offer that amendment. Second by Representative Collins. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The next amendment basically addresses the fact that what we don't want to do is have the rate reduced at the state level and then picked up again at the county or city level. So the bill provides that cities and counties cannot do that, but this is an amendment that says a county or municipal governing body that reduces its general or retail sales tax on food for local sales and use taxes pursuant to this section may subsequently increase the rate on food not to exceed the rate in effect in the county or municipality on the effective date of this act. So basically, if a county or city had a rate of 5%, just for example, and they reduced it 2 cents, they could go back to 5, but they couldn't go above that on food. Offer that amendment? Yes. Representative Drummond?
Can you go into more detail on that amendment? Does that mean that municipalities, if they, I mean, what are the parameters that can deem them to go back to the 5% if that's
what it just says is if the state is going to cut the grocery tax, the intent would be that the tax on food not be then that cut be picked up at the local level. And so what this is saying is that if a county or they don't have to do anything, they can leave their food tax as it is, but they can't raise their food tax. Because if they did, they'd be negating what we're just doing at the state level. But this would give them the ability, if they reduced it and then later decide they wanted to go back, they could go back to where they are today, but couldn't go higher on food only, not other sales taxes, just food.
It basically incentivizes local governments to reduce the grocery tax.
or to go back to the 5%.
Well, otherwise, if they did not have this backstop, then they probably would not reduce their grocery tax out of fear that, they can't then go back if they should ever need to go back to where they are currently. But this would give them that security.
Okay,
to be able to do
Mr. Chair,
that.
I understand the security. I'm trying to get a further explanation of what's in the bill to make them not go back to it. What parameters are set in the bill that it's based on sound foundation if they choose to go back to
Well, it doesn't
the
address that. It doesn't address that. It just says that if you reduce your grocery tax at the local or county level and you later want to raise it, you can go back to where you are today. But if you go above that, then you're basically negating what we're doing by reducing the tax. So it doesn't set parameters other than the fact that you can't raise your grocery tax to backfill what we're cutting at the state level. Because we want ultimately the citizens not to pay more than 2 cents at the state level on groceries and not to pay any more tax on groceries at the local or county level. Representative Faulkner.
Yeah, my questioning's on the same lines here. I understood the premise, and it sounded very good to me that we were trying to protect the citizens from getting hit by city tax to negate what we've done at the state level. Well, and so I agree with that premise, but I also know that a lot of our cities, a grocery store in a small municipality is and many times the number one generator of taxes in that city. And I'm wondering if we can find some balance here, because I would hate to do something for the future, meaning that these cities are forever prohibited from being able to raise their sales tax. With regard to that,
the bill, to be clear, the bill does not allow. The bill prohibits any additional level of local sales tax on food.
Correct.
That's the bill.
Correct.
And this amendment is designed to basically say if you lower it, you can go back to where you are now.
Right.
But the bill, without the amendment, says you cannot raise your tax on food.
Yeah, and I don't really have a problem with the amendment, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but I do have concerns that we are not letting cities forever be able to, even with the amendment, to ever go up on their sale where you've got, that's a concern for me. And because I get the first part, but I think we've got to give these cities, I don't know if we have like a amount of I don't want cities, believe me, to come in and negate what we're doing. But at the same time, how can we hold that, bind in our city leaders and not give them the ability 3 years from now and you've got a grocery store, which is, particularly y'all saw during COVID how much the revenues are from that. I just feel like we might need to think about not binding them in and maybe putting a sunset on a ban that doesn't let them raise sales taxes. That would include food because small municipalities.
Representative Collin.
Representative Faulkner, to your point, I wonder if we can make a check on the state level to where if a city wants to increase over their current, maybe it has to come through us, like a local bill. That way at least the state's then kind of checking off saying, okay, that city needs to raise that tax. Not that I'm advocating for a tax increase to you people in the media, but I wonder if that's a way, we're checking that increase, at least a local bill, or maybe we can allow the cities, if it's a vote by the people, that way there's just still a check there to allow if they want to increase.
Representative Drummond.
I understand what my colleague wants to do, but that's going to create such a fragmented, uneven system throughout the state. So I would not be in favor of that.
Representative Daniels.
Yeah, to Representative Faulkner's point, I think our whole, making this decision is to try to give some relief to families. And so I'm not necessarily seeing why they would need to increase it more than where they are right now. It's just you can go down, but you can't go up. And so I'm not understanding why in the future they would need to increase the tax on groceries. When you look at the percentage and you look at the cost of the items at the grocery store or any other items locally, from a percentage, you're already going to be receiving more because the prices are not going down. And 1 cent of $10 is a lot more revenue than 1 cent or $5 for the same item 2 years ago. And so they're beginning to see an increase in revenue anyway as a result of the prices going up in the grocery stores. And so I think the whole point of this is to try to figure out a way to give relief but being very cautious and very risk averse for these local communities to be able to either lower or make the adjustment to come back where they were. And so I don't necessarily see a revenue loss here. I see a revenue gain because of the increase of the item itself, and the percentage of a 2 or 3% of the same item 2 years ago is now double, so they're getting more money anyway.
Well, ma'am, I think Representative Daniels just got it for me today. No, so the cost of everything is going up, and what cities are having to manage. What I'm saying, we're here at a state government level. I worry about our cities trying to provide local needs for the citizens of Alabama, and everything they do costs more to maintain roads or to make repairs in city departments, to pick up garbage or whatever it is. And I think for us to just say Kirk, I want to make sure of this. We're not saying they can't raise their sales tax. We're saying they can't raise their sales tax that would include on food. So I'm assuming it's for grocery stores that sell, say, mops and toothpaste, that's somehow going to be separated and that from a grocery store. So you're going to have to divide up.
This is on a SNAP definition of food.
Right. And that's the same way it would be. So it would only be limiting, I guess, the cities from the actual tax on the SNAP definition of food. Right. But to not give them, I want to accomplish all the things we're talking about. I just feel like that really could hamstring our small municipalities on their grocery store receipts, and including food. I don't know what that number is, but that's just my concern about this is on the cities. I'm totally in support of the bill, but
I never thought I would see you publicly support a tax increase.
No, I'm not. I'm not supporting a tax increase.
Okay, let's hear from Kirk.
So, part of the reason why or actually the reason why the bill even mentions municipalities and counties is because of a bill that was passed in 1998 that tied the sales tax base for all cities, counties, and the state together. So as it stands right now, a city or county could not do this, could not reduce the rate on food absent you including them in this bill and doing this because food is not defined for sales and use tax purposes in Alabama right now, meaning a county or city can't just decide on their own, I'm going to exempt food and make up my own definition because they're subject to the same base. Consequently, if you didn't mention them in this by reference of exactly what I just said, they would automatically lower their rate by 1% when the state rate lowers because you've now defined food, it is the SNAP, and lowered the rate. And most of the local sales taxes have language and verbatim that basically says they parallel the state taxes with the exception of the rate. So if you do something that pulls something out and treats it separately, then it automatically treats them separately as well.
Any other comments, questions? Is that the amendment? We're seconding the amendment? Okay, so the amendment's been seconded, all right? So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So now I'll entertain a motion on the bill. Favor report,
Second.
Representative Collins, is amended by and seconded Representative Daniels. All in favor say aye. All opposed? All right, bill's given favorable report. Thank you. We need to move quickly to SB 175. This is something I should have taken earlier. This is Re-Engage Alabama. It's a budget item. This is a substitute. So I'd make a motion. Somebody needs to make a motion to adopt the sub. Representative Drummond, second. Second, Representative Collins. All in favor say aye. Representative Baker.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill has changed, on the sub quite a bit from the Re-Engage bill that was originally a part of the bill. I'll try to move very quickly. The bill does establish a new grant program to assist Alabama residents in earning short-term credentials, particularly in the in-demand career opportunities. This is referred to as the Alabama Short-Term Credential Scholarship Program. I would mention that this does repeal the Alabama Apprenticeship Tax Credit Act. This would be where the community colleges would work in consultation with the regional workforce councils, also with a listing of any of the in-demand jobs for this going forward. Also, it's where for an eligible student, they must first, prior to the grant being received, they must have applied for the FAFSA, then the free application for federal student aid, and any other types of federal types or state then types of programs. This would be up to $4,500 for the grant, and it would be where this would be the Alabama Community College System would be the entity that would be the implementer, administrator of this program. It does allow for the short-term credential scholarship fund to be established, the state treasury, and the legislature be able to appropriate funds as it sees fit. It would also be at a $7 million annual cap. This would be the Department of Revenue that would ensure that the cap is not exceeded. There's a sunset on this, so this would sunset in 2028. And also there would be annual reports that would be a part of this. And then one final note that would be for students eligible students that have failed to complete on this, their obligation, then there is a clawback on this as well.
So this is again designed to help re-engage the workforce and credentialing program. I'll entertain a motion. Motion. Second, Representative Wood. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The bill's going to favor report. Let's go quickly to the last bill, SB 299. This is a bill that Senator Orr. I'm sorry.
Point of order on that. We just want to make sure. So was that, I knew we adopted this up earlier. Was that a motion to give the bill a favorable report? I just wanted to make
That's
clarify.
what I thought. Did
Okay.
I get
I
it
wasn't
myself?
sure. I just
Y'all
wanted
clear?
to clarify on a point of order.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Is everybody clear about that? We got it. Okay, we're good. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Baker. SB 299 is basically a bill that will, there are several credits that do not sunset right now. And, we're now in a mode where every time we pass a credit, we're sunsetting those credits. Specifically, this is the coal production credit, brownfield development tax credit, rural physician tax credit, coal production tax credit, as I mentioned, Full Employment Act, Veterans Employment Act, Irrigation Equipment Tax, Entertainment Industry Act of 2009, Enterprise Zone Act. This basically will sunset these tax credits like others in 5 years. So,
No.
question. Have a question, Representative Daniels?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to figure out why we're grouping, kind of putting all of these credits together and not dealing with them individually.
Well, the bill is basically trying to look at, I guess there are a number of credits on the books that are not being utilized or, or not being, that have not, we're trying to identify those that have not sunset. So we're rather than you're saying, should we bring an individual bill in each one of these, or we're just basically saying these are credits that we feel like have not sunset, we need to sunset. And that some of these, for example, like the entertainment industry, we've got other activities going on. So, as you know, so we've got, I guess these are just the credits we felt like we should sunset at least in 5 years.
So I was just, looking at this, I was just making sure that, the content of this bill, is it germane to the subject of the bill in gross? And so
again,
relating to coal production tax.
Oh, the coal production. Okay, so that coal production tax credit, what happened is it's not really being utilized right now. That language there will just eliminate, will give some language that will maybe allow for some additional usage of that tax credit. But the point is it's not sunsetting right now.
Yeah, traditionally we've dealt with a bill earlier that dealt with a lot of different things, and I just get real concerned when we're kind of putting everything together.
We can carry this over if you like. Seriously, we can carry it over again, and we can meet tomorrow if we need to.
I think we need to.
Okay, all right. We'll carry this bill over. We'll just try to meet tomorrow, and we'll carry this over. Last bill we have is Representative Oliver. Again, this is one of the bills that is just, I think, we're teeing up for discussion. Representative Keel.
Sure. HB 283 terminates the existing rural physician tax credit and implements a new one for rural areas. Those are populations of counties with population of 50,000 or less, and that would include a municipality of 15,000 or less, or an incorporated area of the county. And the intent is to assist with recruitment of physicians to rural areas in Alabama.
Again, I think this is something that's going to require future discussion, but happy to entertain a motion.
So move.
Representative Daniels. Second, Representative Baker. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Bill gives in favor report. Thank you guys moving for this agenda. That's a very good effort. Please come with me with questions. This will be on the floor tomorrow. And also we'll have a committee meeting to talk about SB 299. Please if you have any questions or concerns, get with me before that time. Thank you very much. Meeting stand adjourned.